One thing I love about doing furniture is there's limitless options, but that's also the tricky part. I finally narrowed it down though, and it's time to give this particle board dresser a glow up. To check if the dresser you're working on is particle board, you can look at the back seams of the drawers and the body and it will show you there. And then the surface of the dresser and the inside of the drawers is what's called laminate, and it's just a big print to make it look like wood grain. First, I'm going to get any repairs I need to do before I start on prep, and I'm also going to go over the body and make sure all the screws are tightened first as well. Particle board is more prone to water damage, so if you have that or any other kind of damage, you need to sand it down completely flat first, then fill it, then sand it again. Then I took a trip over to Home Depot to pick up some trim for our furniture, and if you haven't been in that aisle, what you'll see is MDF painted white, then there's real wood painted white, then there's raw wood, and then all of these, which we're going to use this type, it's made of PVC, kind of like a plastic. I pick this kind when I'm working on particle board dressers because I'm just going to paint over it, and it's also really good for using miter shears on. It cuts pretty easily. If I was going to be staining the wood, then I would be using wood trim instead. This is the trim I'm going to be picking for the front of the drawers, and then I'm going to use this baseboard for the sides of the dresser. Since I'm going to be putting trim on the front of these drawers, it's really important to make sure that all the drawers are in their best fitted places, and some of them will rub on the edges more than others, so I rearranged the drawers until I found the best fit, and then I numbered them. After taking the drawers out, I realized how wiggly the frame was, so I needed some extra reinforcement. I wound up putting 4 brackets in, and then when I went to the top, it was still wiggling. So then I decided I was going to cut a board and put it across the upper inside area and use some Kreg screws to drill it in. It's really easy to make these pocket holes with the Kreg jig. If you want to see my 3-minute video tutorial, it is posted on my channel. I put this beam on the top and it's still wiggling, so now I'm going to try to put a beam through the middle and attach it to the bottom there. At this point, it was starting to feel like that book, If You Give a Mouse a Cookie, because one thing just kept leading to another, but I finally got it stable. Now we can finally start on the regular prep steps. First step is cleaning. I use TSP Alternative to clean, but you can use whatever degreasing cleaner you prefer. The next prep step is scuff sanding. This will help get the sheen off so the primer sticks better. After cleaning up the sanding debris, I nailed the backing back on, and then I'm getting the little baseboards for the sides of the dresser ready to put on before I prime the body. I'm going to be painting primer on the front of the drawers before I put the trim on, because it's easier to see my pencil marks on the white background than it is on the dark surface that the dresser is right now. I'm taping off the perimeter with frog tape. It's my favorite kind of tape for clean lines. Now it's time for primer. This is my favorite brand. It's Sinzerbin with shellac. It has really great adhesion. It's a really good stain blocker if you're working on real wood. And then an added benefit for particle board is that you're putting that protective barrier between the surface of the particle board, so it'll prevent future water damage. This kind of primer dries very, very quickly, so when you're painting in rows, make sure to overlap in the center there and paint down the edges, because they will show later if you let the edges peek between rows. After you've gotten your 2 layers of primer down, then you need to sand down any texture that's left behind. It sands down really quickly and easily, and then I just glide my hand over the surface to see if there's anything I missed. Now we're moving on to drawing the design on the front of where we want the trim to be. I do this while the drawers are still in the dresser because that's how they're going to be sitting once I put the drawers back in when this is all done. So that part's really important for the alignment of trim going across the drawer fronts. I tried to make it easier for you guys to see the pencil in these shots, so I brought up the sharpen filter, so that's why it looks a little strange right now, but I'm putting a perimeter around the whole thing. You can decide if you want an inch inside, 2 inches, and this is where the trim's going to start away from the border on all sides. Then I'm deciding where I want my sections to be. And right here, I'm kind of imagining how deep I want my edges to cut across diagonally and making my marks. These are going to be 3 boxes of trim. And on this one, I'm putting 1.5 inches down and over and drawing diagonally across because that's where I want the trim to go for this one. Doing that on all 3 sections, and I'm doing this on the bottom drawer as well, of course. And I'm going to also put a little piece of trim on the top and the bottom. Now we're ready to make our marks and start cutting. And I'm going to be using these miter shears. You can get them at Home Depot or Lowe's, but the ones with this little guide that adjusts, it's actually on Amazon. I always mark the drawers with a number and the back of the trim to make sure I know where its corresponding place is when I'm all done and I have a big pile of trim to sort through. Sometimes I put a little arrow in the direction that the cut's going to be just to remind my mind, because I do get a little confused sometimes. And I just set them to the angle I want. This is a 45-degree angle. And you pull the mark to the middle and cut. If you're watching this and you're used to doing trim, you might notice the mistake I made here. So even though these are the same width, because I cut one at an angle and not the other one, it's not meeting up. It's got a bunch of overhang because of the angle. So what it means is I'm going to need to make an angle on these two. Finding an equal angle for all of these edges actually was a lot harder than I expected, but what finally worked was just 4 to 5 nicks right above 105 degrees is what wound up working. So what you do is you get your piece of trim, you always have it resting on the base there, and then you bring the top edge up to the degree that you need. So I lift it up there, and that will produce the correct angle in the center there. If there's any bit of overhang, you just do a real quick sand and it'll be good to go. And then again, see, I have my arrow there because I forget. You put it against the base, bring the top edge up to the angle, the degree that you want, and then cut. And again, it was just 4 to 5 nicks above 105 degrees. And these are the miter shears that I got from either Home Depot or Lowe's without the guard because it's such a strange angle. And then the tape is just there to remind my eye of where to go and not have to check the little line over and over again. Next, I glue the pieces down and I let them dry overnight before I put nails through because these are really slippery on surfaces once the glue's on there, and I get nervous about putting nails through and having the placement wind up wrong and having to rip it off and fix damage. So just let it dry overnight in place and then get to nailing them down with my pressure gun the next day. And it's time to fill up all the holes and between the edges of the trim with wood filler. I actually regret using this kind of wood filler because it sunk down into the holes and shrunk over and over again. So I had to do this 3 times, and by that point it was so covered with wood filler that it took quite a bit of sanding to get down. So use a wood filler that is shrink resistant. The DAP plastic wood line has always been a reliable wood filler to me. They have some that are runnier and some that are thicker. Now that that's done, I went back to the store to get my favorite foam rollers by Wiz brand and my favorite paintbrush for edges, which is the Zebra Brush Square Tip. Then I tape off the perimeter of the drawers for spraying the same type of shellac that I used with the body, but it's easier to use the spray can for the trim pieces. After the primer is thoroughly dry, make sure to do a sand down of all the texture to ensure that the paint finish is very smooth. I'm going to measure out where I need to put the knobs now. I'm going to be putting the knobs on the two side sections. And because it is difficult to get the ruler in there, I'm just going to get it nice and flat in there with this piece of paper. And then I put my crease in here with my fingernail. And then what I did is I pulled it back away and I measured how far across that is. And it is luckily right at the 15 mark here. So half of that, 7.5. So I go up, make that mark there. And then put the paper back in here so I can get nice and flat in there. And put my nick. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the bottom piece and then get my yardstick and level them up and draw a line across the center so that I can make sure each of my knobs on the 4 drawers will all line up. For the top drawer, the middle mark actually winds up being quite high and I don't want it to distract from the trim. So I think I'm going to opt to make it a little bit lower, but still kind of trick the eye to make it seem like it's in the center. Now I can drill the holes for the knobs, and I like to start with a smaller drill bit first, just to make sure it's really precise in the correct spot and so there's minimal chipping, and then I go with the larger size, which the screw will fit into. I chose the color Vermont Slate in the Benjamin Moore Advanced line. It's an enamel, so it's durable and it has good self-leveling properties. It also doesn't require a top coat. Okay, so we're on to the body now. And this is pretty simple, but I'm going to show you my tricks for getting a smooth finish. Make sure you always mix your paint before using. I did the drawers yesterday, so I'm mixing it again. That's to make sure that the pigment and the finish are going to be even still. I use a Wiz brand foam roller on all my projects. And then for the angles and edges, I'm going to be using my square zebra brush again. Okay. So here we go with the Wiz foam roller. Make sure I have an even amount on here. As I'm going over, go all the way down. Sorry, some of this angle is cut off the bottom in the video, but do what we can. Okay, so I got my strip done. And now when I go over it, barely any pressure at all. I'm really just, letting it rest on there and come down. Hardly even holding it. Okay, and then just let it be. And then go on to your next row. It's really important to go back and make sure you don't have any drips puddling or anything like that, because that's going to be a big pain in the butt to sand later. It's important when you do the sections to not overwork them, because once you start going over too many times, when the paint starts trying to set up, it will actually produce more texture if you overwork it.
We're getting near the end of this project. I really love how this one turns out. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Here's a little reminder of our before, and here's the after.